It's the week of Christmas, so let's be salty. Hey everyone, I'm TM Sparrow, writer and homeschooling mom, and today I'm going to rant about my least favorite fantasy tropes. If you've been watching my channel for a while now, you probably already know that fantasy is my favorite genre of all time. Whether it's high fantasy, dark fantasy, urban fantasy, if it's fantasy, I love it. However, there are some things about the genre that I don't love. So, since it's the week of Christmas, I'm going to tell you all about the 10 fantasy tropes that are on my naughty list. So let's just get right into it. Number 1, everyone is white. Listen, this is fantasy. It's literally all made up from your imagination. There is no excuse for your entire cast to be white. But TM, nope. No excuses. I don't care what society or culture or whatever you based your world or story on. Black people existed. Asian people existed. Latinx people existed. People of all creeds and colors existed. People traveled and immigrated and what have you. And for crying out loud, it's a made-up story. Who cares if you don't believe that black people existed in medieval Europe? Spoiler alert, they did. The great thing about fantasy is you don't have to be accurate to people's misconceptions. Number 2, the useless princess. This is a character who annoys me to no end. She's a princess, and for some reason she has to be escorted or protected or whatever for reasons that are important to the plot. The catch is that she's whiny, spoiled, and useless. It's so ridiculous, old, and tired. Can we please just move on? I'm not saying she has to be a sword-wielding badass, but can we at least make her a little more interesting? I mean, look up some historical princesses and see what they were actually like. Catherine of Aragon was a hardcore woman who endured a lot. Isabella of France totally kicked butt. Seriously. Just do some research and stop making every princess ever a whiny wet blanket. Number 3, generic villains. I know. In my video about my favorite fantasy tropes, I said that I love a villain who's truly evil. And while I may not care if your villain has some noble motive for the atrocities they commit, that doesn't mean that I want to keep reading about the same bland, generic Dark Lord. Give them their own voice and personality. Make them interesting. Make them scary. Dark Lord clone number 4 can just go die in a fire. Thanks. Number 4, stereotyped races. Beautiful, ethereal elves. Grumpy Scottish dwarves. Good races. Evil races. Can we please get a little variety and originality? There's a ton of mythology and lore from around the world. So much story fodder. So let's just start thinking outside of the box on this one for once. Number 5, all England, all the time. Why does it seem like every fantasy book ever is written in some quaint English countryside kingdom? Rolling green hills and misty mountain forests abound in the idyllic, once peaceful lands of this kingdom. Beautiful, sure, but it starts to get old. Give me some variety here, people. What about the deserts, the plains, the rainforests? The world is full of all kinds of climates and cultures. There's more out there than rolling green hills and castles. I mean, think about this. desert nomad elves, right? What about dwarves that live on the tundra or a fjord? There are so many options if you just think outside the box. Number 4. Everyone lives! This one drives me up the wall. In fact, this might be my least favorite trope on this list. I hate it that much. This is the major hyped up battle that we've spent the whole series building up to, only to have all of the important characters survive. Any deaths are either fake, minor characters, or not permanent. There have been series that I absolutely adored, and then they did this big anticlimactic battle, and I just felt so let down. In fact, it actually ruined the entire series for me. Don't be afraid to kill characters. Tolkien killed off most of my favorite dwarfs in the big battle in The Hobbit, and I cried, and it's still one of my favorite books. I'm not saying everyone has to die, just that there are casualties in war. So if you have this major epic battle at the end of your book, make sure that it lives up to the hype. Number 7. Dark is edgy. These days, it seems like everyone wants to create these dark and edgy worlds where everyone and everything sucks. And for me, I just don't get it. This darkness doesn't really even seem to serve a purpose. So what we end up with is cardboard cutout characters like the brooding angry hero and the jaded love interest or whatever. Instead of interesting and engaging plots, we get violence, gore, cursing, and graphic sex scenes. And don't get me wrong, I don't mind these things in some measure, but it just seems like everyone is using these things to make their worlds gritty and edgy, and I hate it. I just want my fantasy to be an escape. I don't want to come away from the story feeling like everything is hopeless. Number 8. The Instant Expert. And then we have the complete opposite end of the realism spectrum. An untrained novice who picks up a sword and can suddenly hold their own against the masters with years and years of training and experience. No. Just no. It doesn't work like that. Sure, Farmer John can trade his pitchfork for a sword, but when he goes to fight that battle-hardened general with years and years of experience fighting with a sword, yeah, he's not gonna last long. Number 9. World-building info dumps. Okay, old school fantasy is especially notorious for this. I don't need 5 pages describing your setting. It gets really boring really fast. I also don't need a 10-page backstory for all your political drama. All I want to see of your world is what's important to the story. Show me what your protagonist sees and nothing else. And trust me, no one is going to spend that much time staring at the scenery and waxing poetic about it. We get it. You love the world that you built, and that's great, but you've got to kill those darlings and spare your readers the tedium. And number 10, the dead mentor. Does the mentor really have to die in like every book ever? I mean, it's hard for me to think of a single book where the mentor actually survives. And why? To motivate the protagonist? I don't get it. I mean, in some cases, the mentor does gain some kind of special powers through this death, like Obi-Wan or Gandalf. But that is not the case most of the time. At this point, a mentor death just feels pointless, because it's been done over and over and over again. So if you have a mentor character and you're thinking about killing them off, ask yourself, why? What does this add to the story? Are you getting rid of an unnecessary character? If so, ask yourself why they're in the story in the first place. Do you want to motivate your main character? If so, maybe find a better way. I'm not saying never kill a mentor character, just keep in mind that it's not going to come as a shock to anyone, so make sure there's a good reason for it. So those are the 10 fantasy tropes that make my naughty list. I'd love to know what your least favorite fantasy trope is, so drop a comment down below and let me know. Or, as always, you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And if you want to see more, then don't forget to subscribe. I post new videos on Wednesdays. See you next time!
Ho ho ho! Merry Christmas! Hi everyone! I'm TM Sparrow, writer and homeschooling mom, and today I'm going to share my least favorite fantasy tropes with you. Number 1, the Black Witch. I feel like they've done this so many times, I've just gotten tired of it. If you check out my favorite fantasy tropes, no, it's in my hand, right here. Ta-da! Beep, 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 beep. You should go watch that video to learn more information about the White Witch. Yay! Number 2, pine cones falling on the head. How can pine cones knock someone out? That's just silly, honestly. Like a pine cone going bonk, and then you're going, oh. That's just silly. Number 3, being eaten by a not very intelligent T-Rex. If the T-Rex isn't very intelligent, then that character must have no intelligence at all.